I've done a couple of sessions at this year's IATEFL. The first one I did was on Monday at the Young Learner and Teenager pre-conference event, and I was giving the opening plenary on values education. And values education is a very complex and actually at times quite controversial topic. And what I did during my session was first of all actually have a look at various different definitions of values. What actually are we talking about when we talk about values, and what do we mean by values education? And I then went on to kind of open a Pandora's box and unpack some of the issues that make values complex and controversial. For example, whose values are we teaching? What values are we teaching? Can we identify universal human values that might apply in all different cultures? How can we assess values if they are an integrated part of the curriculum? What I then went on to do was to have a look at some of the research on values education. And I think it's very interesting that the research shows that values education not only has an impact on students' self-esteem, their well-being, their ability to empathise and to relate to others, but it also has an impact on their academic diligence and their effort and also their behaviour. So I think that for all of us there are some very good reasons for integrating values education into our classrooms. In the second half of the session, what I went on to do was to actually look at a practical toolkit of activities and ideas to develop values education. And in the conclusion, I pulled things together by talking about why values education is so important in the world that we live in today. And actually, values education as a topic links very closely to my session at the main conference, which I did this afternoon, on teaching life skills to children. And life skills for children obviously takes place in very different contexts, in ELT classrooms around the world, but also in more difficult circumstances, such as war zones or refugee camps. And so we started off by looking at a definition of life skills that would be valid for all those different circumstances. And the one that I drew on was the definition that's most commonly used in the literature, developed by international organisations such as the World Health Organization, UNESCO and UNICEF. We then went on to look at the 10 core life skills that can be broadly categorized under thinking skills, social skills and personal skills. And following that, we went on to look at how to integrate values education into our everyday teaching and our everyday classes. And I shared with participants two examples. One, when we work with stories with children, which we do very often, how we can actually move beyond the typical reading, comprehension activities, vocabulary development activities, to actually develop children's life skills, their critical thinking, their creative thinking, their self-awareness, their empathy. And what I then went on to do was to share with the participants a model of life skills, which is not my model, which comes from the United States, and it's called the 4H model of life skills. And the 4 H's stand for head, heart, hands and health. And this model was originally developed for older students thinking of employment in the future, and I've adapted it to be thinking about children learning English. And so for cognition, we looked at, we looked at cognition and metacognition and ideas for how we can include that in our classes. For heart, we looked at aspects of caring for ourselves and building students' competence, confidence, self-esteem, their pleasure and enjoyment that they get to learning, and also caring for others through values education and intercultural awareness. We also looked at hands being to do the way children work together, the way they cooperate, empathize, and also the way they contribute to the community. So it could also be to do with things, you know, the way they recycle or clear up rubbish in the playground, that kind of thing. And lastly, we looked at health, and the two categories of health that I mentioned were the category of being, and being to do with our mindsets, and in particular I drew on the work of Carol Dweck and the importance of developing a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. And the last thing we looked at in relation to health was to do with awareness of lifestyle choices. So things like healthy eating, personal hygiene, getting enough sleep, that kind of area.